Hello, everyone. We are going to wait a few seconds. A lot of folks are joining us. I'm going to wait probably 30 seconds before we get started. We are having a full house, and hopefully everybody's audio will be working fine. If you're finding issues with your audio, I do recommend that you try connecting through the phone if that's a better choice for you. And I'll give you more directions in a couple of seconds here. Okay. Well, welcome. This is a very special webinar, our Earth Day at 50, Laudato Si at 5, an urgent appeal for action. Program is going to be for the first time used as a webinar. I'm Paz Artaza Regan, Program Manager at Catholic Climate Covenant, and welcome everyone. Before we begin, I always start with some housekeeping issues, notes. As I said, if you have audio issues, please try connecting through your phone. It'll give you the information of how to do that in your box that says audio. You will be observers of how a small group can use the Earth Day educational program, but you will also be able to participate during parts of the program. The question box in your control panel will be used for both questions if you have one, and for you to submit your ideas, especially your climate action pledges. And we'll get to that when we're in the discussion section. The webinar is being recorded, and we will send it to you within 24 to 48 hours. Today, we are going to be using the revised Earth Day 2020 educational program. We're going to use it to commemorate both the 50th anniversary of Earth Day and the 5th anniversary of Laudato Si. Traditionally, the Earth Day program that the Covenant has had has always been designed as an educational program for group events in parishes, schools, and religious communities. But the coronavirus pandemic has made us, not be able to have those kind of events, and they're impossible probably to schedule in the next couple of weeks. So we revised the original program, which is available at the link here, and you will receive all these links and the deck with the recording. Also available at this link is the Spanish version, the facilitator program, everything is there. Feel free to use the program as an individual, as a family, or as a small online group during the next month as we celebrate the 5th anniversary of Laudato Si with prayer, study, and with climate actions. I'm delighted today to be joined by representatives from the Covenant's most active partner organizations. They've agreed to participate in this new online format of the Earth Day program, and for that, I'm thankful for their being there to try this out. Please welcome today Marianne Comfort, Justice Coordinator for Earth, Anti-Racism, and Women at the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas. Brenna Davis, Director of Education for Justice and Environmental Initiatives at the Ignatian Solidarity Network. Sister Ann Scholz, Associate Director for Social Mission, Leadership Conference of Women Religious. Russ Testa, Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation Animator with the Holy Name Province of the Franciscans. And Scott Wright, Director of the Columban Center for Advocacy and Outreach. Together today, we're going to be guiding you through the prayers, the readings, a short video, reflection, and discussion questions, and the climate action pledge activity. Sister Ann will get the program started with an opening prayer.
So let's just take a moment and remember that because we're gathered here together, our God has promised always to be in our midst. O Creator, our world is large, and yet your creation is so fragile. We glimpse the needs of our common home, of our sisters and brothers, and those needs are great. We want to turn away, but you call us back. We want simple solutions, but you want us to help solve the complex problems. Through your church, you call us to listen, to learn, to reflect, and to act. Give us a deep sense of our place in this web of creation. Give us the wisdom of mind and the generosity of heart to seek your will in the world today. Inspire us to respond to the call to live in solidarity with all of your creation, so that the earth and the children of God might live in dignity and peace. Amen.
A reading from the book of James. Be doers of the word and not hearers only, deluding yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, they are like someone who looks at their own face in a mirror. They see themselves, then they go off and promptly forget what they looked like. But the one who peers into the perfect law of freedom and perseveres is not a hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts. Such a one shall be blessed in what they do.
The Earth's climate is changing. Temperatures are rising, snow and rainfall patterns are shifting, and more extreme climate events like heavy rainstorms and record high temperatures are already happening. Many of these observed changes are linked to the rising levels of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, all caused by human activities.
Climate models project robust differences in regional climate characteristics between present day and global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius and between 1.5 degrees Celsius and 2 degrees Celsius. These differences include increases in mean temperatures in most land and ocean regions, hot extremes in most inhabited regions, heavy precipitation in several regions, and the probability of drought and precipitation deficits in some regions. Limiting the risks from global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius in the context of sustainable development and poverty eradication implies system transitions.
A reading from Laudato Si. The urgent challenge to protect our common home includes a concern to bring the whole human family together to seek a sustainable and integral development. Humanity still has the ability to work together in building our common home. Young people demand change. They wonder how anyone can claim to be building a better future without thinking of the environmental crisis and the sufferings of the excluded. I urgently appeal then for a new dialogue about how we are shaping the future of our planet. We need a conversation which includes everyone, since the environmental challenge we are all undergoing and its human roots concern and affect us all.
And as Pope St. John Paul II reminded us in his World Day of Peace message in 1990, an education in ecological responsibility is urgent. Responsibility for oneself, for others, and for Earth.
We are going to move now to our video section. Bear with me as I share it with you.
Hello to all of you throughout the world who follow UN climate change. I'd like to share an important milestone with you. 25 years ago, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or the UNFCCC, came into force. But the importance of what we do remains. Think back 25 years. It is much easier for some of us than others. There was no widespread use of cell phones. The internet was in its infancy. We still got our news from newspapers. In those newspapers, we were reading more about a subject that had been gaining attention, climate change. We read that people were concerned enough that they wanted their national representatives to come together at a global level and do something about it. In 1992, that's what nations did. Leaders spanning the political spectrum came together at the Rio Earth Summit. That's where the UNFCCC was opened for signature. It was a commitment to bring the world together to curb greenhouse gas emissions and address climate change. 3 years later, the UNFCCC officially came into force. That's what we celebrate today. The last 25 years have seen a mix of challenges and opportunities, and a few disappointments, matched by some incredible successes. In 25 years, we've gone from the Kyoto Protocol to the Paris Agreement, and just last year, nations fortified that agreement with a set of guidelines designed to maximize its impact. Never have we needed it more. A total of 11,000 extreme weather events occurred between 1997 and 2016 worldwide. They resulted in more than 500,000 deaths and damage equivalent to 3.16 trillion US dollars. Those were real people, people with families and friends, and every one of them had dreams and hopes and futures. So while we've made enormous progress in 25 years, the world is still running behind climate change. Today, the urgency to address it has never been greater. But because of the work begun 25 years ago, we are also better coordinated to take it on. We have the Paris Agreement and we have the guidelines strengthening that agreement. What we need now are results. Let this milestone not only serve as a reminder of where we have been, but as a springboard to where we are going. Let us continue to build a world that is not only cleaner and greener, but more sustainable, resilient, and prosperous as well. And I know I can count on all of you. Thank you.
It's important to have honest conversations about climate change because we need to be all educated about it and we need to be aware of what's happening in the world. Climate change is a global issue and it affects everyone at some point in time. Therefore, we need to be educated and make a change.
Greetings from Nairobi, Kenya. My name is Alan Otaro and I'm the Executive Director of the Catholic Youth Network for Environmental Sustainability in Africa, an initiative that brings together young Catholics from all across the African continent to respond to the ecological crisis that we face. I grew up in a small town called Njoro, and over the years growing up as a young boy, I saw the destruction of the Mao Forest Complex, which led to the drying up of rivers, and as a result, access and availability of water in my hometown was impacted and affected by this. People have to walk many kilometers just to find availability of clean water to drink. This has further been...
Oh no.
Hello, everyone. I've been getting a lot of messages that people cannot see the video. Can you let me know on the chat box if you are seeing the video? Okay, some people are and some people are not. It may be an issue with your computers and how your system is connected. I'm going to try sharing it again. For those that can see it, I do apologize to those that cannot see it. It'll be part of the recording though.
Hello to all of you throughout the world who follow UN climate change. I'd like to share an important milestone with you. 25 years ago, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or the UNFCCC, came into force. But the importance of what we do remains. Think back 25 years. It is much easier for some of us than others. There was no widespread use of cell phones. The internet was in its infancy. We still got our news from newspapers. In those newspapers, we were reading more about a subject that had been gaining attention, climate change. We read that people were concerned enough that they wanted their national representatives to come together at a global level and do something about it. In 1992, that's what nations did. Leaders spanning the political spectrum came together at the Rio Earth Summit. That's where the UNFCCC was opened for signature. It was a commitment to bring the
Oh no.
I apologize. We are having major issues with the video. Don't know why it just stopped at that point. We're going to skip the video. I am apologizing. I hope that you can see it later. It'll be part of the recording. It is also available on its own on YouTube. Very, very sad that we're going to have to do that. At this point, I can tell you that the video, besides Patricia Espinosa with the United Nations, there was a section there that had to do with students and youth and young adults from Australia and Africa sharing their experience with climate change, and they're asking us to take action. I really recommend especially that section. Kind of bummed that that's not going to work. At this point, we are going to continue with the reflection. It's not going to be as rich as I would like it to be after seeing the video, but we will make lemonade when God gives us lemons. So let us get going with the reflection part.
If you are participating as an individual, we urge you to follow up these individual reflections with discussions on your phone, perhaps online with members of your faith community, your school, or with your family. Some of these questions can be answered by you and by your family. Follow up with others in your community to discuss how they are taking action. And once we're again able to meet as communities, you can discuss how we will respond communally.
So as we reflect upon the 5 readings we started with as a part of it, as well as I think each of us as the panelists have been able to see the video, we can ask ourselves what from the readings and what from the video, for those who are able to see it, what impacted you most? And I forgot to say, I guess, in starting these reflections, that I'll have a little pause if you want to write something down. If you're at home, and for us as a panelist, for us to think about our own sharing we'll do, as the way you might use this in your own way of doing this program. Both the Environmental Protection Agency and the United Nations predicted dire climate impacts. What more can be done, and what more can I be doing to lessen these impacts? In the readings, we had a quote from both St. John Paul II and from Pope Francis, speaking of the urgency and responsibility for the earth. Did it surprise you that both of our previous popes had spoken about this? And finally, in the video, there were a number of young Catholics kind of sharing their reflection upon how they were dealing with the situation, working with the climate crisis. And perhaps in your own lives, as you think of your own young people you may have interacted with and had those discussions with as well, you might bring this to this type of reflection. But so how would you respond to their calls for action? And you may want to write down some of those responses.
At this point in the program, we move from reflection to discussion. Those of you that are not with the 6 of us that you're just watching, please observe how the discussion happens. Join in the discussion in the question box. But look at this as an example of how the discussion might be able to happen in an online format or as a small group discussion. In the original program, this would have been a small group within a larger event, perhaps. And you would have had the opportunity to have seen the video where you hear from the United Nations the dire predictions that were there in the 90s and now coming true. And you hear also some of the hope that they see from the international community. And there's also a call for action from the UN as well. Then you hear from the participants in the video about 3 or 4 young women from Catholic schools in Australia that were part of a program that Caritas Australia was very kind to video and send to us, and from young adults and one youth from Africa, from a group there that is working on sustainable environmental community and development. And at the end, there is a short video from the Catholic Health Association, which really is very spiritual and lets us become more centered before we turn to the questions. But right now, we're going to move to our panelists, our group participants, to sort of discuss some of these questions. The third question is really where we're going to ask everyone to participate, but the first 2 will be mostly with the 6. And so the first one is, how have you or your community, or how can you in the future, do more to be doers and not hearers only, as James reminds us to be? How does that reading reflect in how your community, your family, your offices, yourselves, how have you responded to being more of a doer on climate issues than just a listener? And how did you go from being a hearer to a doer? I open it up to our panelists and they will let me know when they're ready. Marianne, go ahead.
Mike.
You're muted. Yeah.
I'm happy to start. Thank you. The Sisters of Mercy, we've launched a year-long Mercy Earth Challenge, where we are moving from hearing the words in Laudato Si as we near the 5th anniversary to actually living it out. we're going to be inviting people throughout the year to look at different aspects of our lifestyle and where we can have conversion of lifestyles and look at our use of water, our use of plastic, look at food waste, various aspects of our lifestyles. So that's one way that we are inviting ourselves and others who want to join us on this journey to become doers.
And I will include a link to the Sisters of Mercy Challenge in the follow-up email. Sister Ann?
I'll talk a little bit about the personal successes and challenges. I live in a small community. There are really just two of us. So both of us share a commitment to sustainability and care for our common home. We're more or less successful. We've tried to go plastic less and paperless, and I can't say that we've gotten there yet, but we've done a pretty good job of learning to, obviously we take cloth bags with us when we shop, we refuse plastic whenever offered. Paper's a little harder, but we've gotten much better about not printing anything that we don't need to print, and reading online as much as possible, paperless billing. That we've been pretty good at. I'll tell you what's hard. That's trying to reduce our energy consumption by reducing the thermostat in the summer, reducing the thermostat, trying to live at 68 degrees in the winter and 78 degrees, 80 degrees in the summer. We don't always do a good job of that because there's two of us and we don't always agree on what's cold and what's hot. But we continue to struggle with it. So my point is we've had some success and we've had some struggle.
Yep, that is a given in any group, be it two people or a group of maybe a whole parish, of what they want to do. Russ?
I'll kind of merge some of those together, maybe just in our own lives. Some of the things that Sister Ann was talking about is my wife and I, we share that same challenge, particularly the thermostat. It's not always her being cold and me being warm. It's often changes all over. The challenge, I think, for me personally, as far as we have tried to cut down our meat consumption, and in that process, really trying to, when we do choose to eat meat, it's coming from local farms and trying to do that. The most difficult part of that, I find, actually, is when I'm traveling, because there aren't a lot of really good vegetarian options. There is that thing we used to do called traveling. But when we did do that, it's really hard when you're there. There's not very much in an airport that's decent. That's a vegetarian food that's not just eating salad, and even a lot of those aren't very good. So there is that challenging piece, I think, of the eating when you're trying to, be more focused on that. So there's a piece of that I think for me has been on the personal side, which we continue to try to do. On some of our parishes and the Franciscans, it has been really kind of refreshing to see how they have changed to buying only renewable energy. They've made that choice in their state, and actually in many cases it's actually saved them money. But that's a different thing. So my wife and I are still working at trying to find where we can do that in Maryland more effectively. And we've got some folks that have also started doing even composting, and some have done solar on their parish. So there's a wide range where I think groups have actually formed. It's like in all things the Catholic Church, I think we found that the challenge is like people were really excited right when Laudato Si came out. We had a little rush to try to think and reflect upon it. And then we kind of got busy doing other stuff like we all do. And then I think this 5th year anniversary really has kind of really revised us. Revived us into this. Even amidst the COVID-19 stuff, I think it's been kind of exciting to see.
Thank you, Russ. I did get a little question here that was very interesting about the idea of using less paper, and they're using more online resources, and how much that compares because you're using more electricity. And that has been something that here in my house we've had to deal with, because we've got a lot of people using a lot of electricity and online resources all the time. But what we did was we switched to wind and solar energy. So that makes me feel a little better that what I'm using is more renewable, and I'm able to use less paper as well. So who would like to go next? Brenna?
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, my kind of what I've been wrestling with this year is why is there seemingly so much inaction and so much just kind of hearing in the Catholic Church, even if people are on board. It's hard to make that transition into doing. I mean, I read this really interesting book called We Are the Weather, and in it the author talks about this idea of transitioning our knowing in our head to our believing in our heart, and how that actually inspires conversion and it inspires action. And so I've really been trying to think about how I can use spiritual practices to help me to move to make those individual choices. But then I think something that we're trying to do at ISN is, and personally in my community with my creation care team at church, is really think about how we can organize as a group, right? Because we have to, we need to address this issue at both ends. And I have this dream of making kind of the USCC be 2 feet of love and action, right? So like works of mercy and social justice, kind of doing that for ecology. Because I think that sometimes we get really stuck in the individual actions. And like I said, without changing our individual actions, we cannot save the planet. But we also need to think about how we can organize as a group. So yeah, I have an action alert out right now about air pollution standards that we would love for Catholics to sign. And I've just really been thinking about how can we join together, and that's what the Covenant is doing, that's what the Catholic Climate Project is doing, but how can we kind of unite behind these issues and really help to use our spiritual practices to move us forward and kind of past this, what I feel like, and especially with what we've seen with the COVID-19 pandemic, is just a lot of fear. And when there's a lot of fear, sometimes we get frozen and don't know what to do. So really trying to find ways to encourage people's hearts in the gospel, and with this idea of using our gospel imagination and creativity to help us move forward as a community, while also taking those individual actions.
Amen. Scott?
So maybe I'll segue a little bit to the second question by mentioning Laudato Si. But Brenna, you mentioned the pandemia, and I think that's on all of our minds. And I think, you know, Laudato Si and this 5th anniversary, in a way, present us with an opportunity to reflect on what currently is now a global crisis, the pandemia, and how it's impacting different communities. So one, I'll offer 2, I think, fruitful reflections that have been part of our groups with different religious congregations that are members of the Covenant. So one is the global impact. The pandemia is affecting vulnerable communities more than others. And I think there's a link to climate change, because oftentimes, for instance, perhaps more obvious, when the immigrant community, many are fleeing across our borders because of climate change is making difficult, if not impossible, their life, farming and other activities. The other is in terms of health. You know, many vulnerable communities, I think of perhaps African American communities in our cities, have more health problems, one of being asthma, which connects to pollution, climate change. And so they're much more vulnerable as well to the pandemia. So that one line within, or many lines within Laudato Si, that everything is interconnected. I think that draws us closer globally and within our own nation to those vulnerable communities, and then invites us to action as well that could make a difference. The other one, and briefly, other reflection is that, you know, I think the response to the pandemic within our own country raises questions. You know, we can respond. We're living in an economy not of scarcity, but abundance. And so when we see 2 months of response with stimulus packages, and we also see the climate around the world clearing, I think it's a moment of reflection and perhaps of hope that the earth itself has within itself healing capacity if we will simply be part of the earth's healing plan and do our part to reduce the things that cause climate change and environmental degradation.
If I could build on Scott's comments, last year at our national conference, the leadership conference, the sisters, the leadership conference of women religious, really took up the Holy Father's call to heed the cries of earth and God's people. And we identified the intersection of climate change, forced migration, and systemic racism as lying at the heart of so much of the injustice that we see in our local communities as well as in our planet community. And so we promised that over the course of the next 3 years, that we would address that intersection through prayer, education, and advocacy to try to, first of all, uncover the roots of that injustice, and then to give voice to the cry of God's earth and God's people, and to advocate for systemic change. And I think that goes back to some of the things that Brianna was saying, that we have to look at this. Obviously, I have to change my behavior. That's a given. Unless we're able to mobilize and organize our communities to demand the systemic change that's necessary, we're only going to get halfway there.
Yes, I like the lemonade we're making, and I like the fact that we've got more time for discussion because we've got to make lemonade. Brenna, a couple of people are asking for you to repeat the name of the author and book that you were mentioning.
Sorry, it's We Are the Weather by Jonathan Safran Foer. And it's a lot about animal agriculture, but it has this very beautiful conversation about how we move from knowing to heartfelt believing.
Perfect, thank you. I think in our discussion, we blended questions 1 and 2. Question 2 was really more of how did Laudato Si prompt you, move you to respond to the idea of dialogue and action? Have there been any Laudato Si moments in your last 5 years that sort of has said, I'm doing this because of Laudato Si?
I would say for us as in the Franciscan world, I mean, we have, particularly more recently, been reminded again, obviously being the 5th anniversary to do stuff in the movements we're already involved in. And so it's kind of, I think, strengthens a lot of our actions, which we knew to do already through some of our care for creation work. But I think it gave us kind of a greater reminder and a push to get those that hadn't been involved as well, and kind of invitation. So we've kind of seen it work at kind of 2 angles. Those folks that are already kind of really committed to climate action or care for creation action, that it becomes an opening and a welcoming point of saying that if they're in the secular world, they can also be engaged with us and vice versa. And then it's also then helped in some of our parishes to kind of do like green parishes and stuff like that, to kind of do that with kind of the eye of Laudato Si. So it's kind of worked both ways.
Sister Anne, did you.
I think too that it is the impetus of Laudato Si and the concept of integral development that has certainly pushed us to see that intersection and to begin to look at things more holistically. And so you can't talk about forced migration without considering climate change. You can't think about systemic racism without looking at how communities of color in this country have been inordinately affected by pollution, waste, lead. So I do think that we owe, to a large extent, that insight into the interdependence of so many of the justice issues that we've been dealing with for years and years and years. I think we owe much of that to Laudato Si and the insights of Pope Francis.
Thanks. Yes, Marianne.
I would add that I think Pope Francis has opened up a space in the larger Catholic community to talk about advocacy with elected officials around this issue, because he's so clear that we need to engage with elected officials, and that the systemic part of caring for our common home is so important, as well as our individual actions. So I think it's opened up that space for dialogue with Catholics, to have them understand that, yes, caring for creation is part of our faith, and yes, taking the small daily actions and engaging with our government leaders are part of our faith as well, and that dialogue includes with one another, and the compromises from the small household to larger aspects of our lives, that dialogue, what we do together, and then the dialogue with government officials to make the systemic changes.
Okay, thank you. Going to have to be moving along because of our time. This next section really brings in all of the participants, everybody who's on this webinar. But we'll first do a little round among the participants here, the 6 of us, and then we'll let you know how we're going to work this. This question is, has there been an action that you could say that you will undertake to lessen the projected impacts on our brothers and sisters in the future? If you have already taken an action, what more could you do? Write down possible future actions that your community or yourself could undertake. This is an exercise that in the original program, you would be talking with a group in your communities, in your parishes, in your schools to come up with something. We really encourage you, come up with an idea and talk with your family, with fellow parishioners, your schoolmates, your colleagues about this future action. I can tell you that here at home, we've already talked about reducing our food waste much more than we are doing. That is our year kind of pledge, that for this year, we are going to cut our food waste by at least 50%. And we're also planting 2 trees in the fall. We've already made that commitment. So I open it up to the folks here, the 5 of you. Those of you that are online, you'll have your chance. Don't worry. You'll get to share your commitments as well. Who wants to go first? Brenna.
Since this is an election year, and as Marianne pointed out, dialoguing with our elected officials is really important. I'm committing to sign up for voter registration, just to make sure that everybody has access to vote in my community. And then along the lines of what you were saying, Paz, I am starting to grow my own food. So I don't have a lot of space in my apartment, but you can actually use food scraps. We just had a food waste challenge for the Ignatian Carbon Challenge, and you can grow like new celery out of old celery. And just growing your own food is like a really great way to connect with the earth, and you're less likely to waste what is grown like with your own hands. When you see the kind of persistent nature of food and creation. It's beautiful. So
excellent. Who's next? Marianne.
I would say I think it could be very interesting to start rethinking the need for travel. That since we're all reorienting ourselves to being able to engage with people on the phone, through teleconferencing, I think once we all return to our workplaces and are able to travel, it could be interesting as organizations across the board to think, when do we really need to travel, and when can we do the work, when can we build relationships, be in community with one another through other means, and thus cut down our carbon emissions that we use on airplanes and lots of car travel, what have you.
Scott?
Well, I know that the Columbans and I think other communities, the Climate Covenant, the idea of a covenant, I think, however you define it in your family, in your local community, in your parish, in your congregation, I think the covenant is a way that we can together affirm our bonds as well as our commitment. So I think one way is to encourage, what would your covenant look like in terms of Laudato Si, in terms of the climate and creation? The other thing I would mention, it's all interconnected. And Columbans are on the border, in El Paso and Ciudad Juarez. And so we're aware both of, the migrants that are fleeing conditions that are inhospitable because of climate change, but also the community is thinking, what would a wall look like, not only in terms of keeping migrants out, but it's destroying biological corridors that are natural. So there's a sense of, even within Laudato Si, talking about biodiversity, that climate change is making entire ecosystems inhospitable. So people are fleeing as migrants, but also biodiversity is disappearing. I mean, as many as 1 million species could disappear in the coming years. And that's both a loss in terms of benefit to human beings, but it's even more a loss in terms of their own value as species, and that invitation to feel our communion with each other across diverse cultures, but also with this common home that includes many, many other species, so that we are part of a larger communion.
Russ?
What we've done, we're trying to do in the Friars, is right before the COVID stuff really hit, we actually our leadership had committed to us saying, how do we figure out how to be carbon neutral by 2029 as the Franciscans in the United States? We'll see how, we'll get there maybe, but anyhow. But one of the things that came to me personally out of it, we had some experts come in and kind of help us think through this process. And he introduced me, and I share it with you all as a way that my wife and I have committed to doing renewable energy and offsets for natural gas, which we have, as well as this group called green-e.org. And I don't know if you can type that up for everybody to see that, Oz, but in the question section, answer or whatever. But so it's green with a dash sign, then E, just the letter E.org. And then you can put in there by your zip code, you can find what's available to you as far as in your state and your region through your electricity company. What's being done with what you have for a renewable source, and also for doing offsets for if you don't have options for electric heating, you have gas heating, I can even do some carbon offsets. And so that's one of the first things we're trying to do in actually all of our ministries and stuff, is how do we start at least first buying renewable energy and kind of creating that push for that market more. And like I said, the other thing we've actually found, it's easier to sell to our friars, is actually it often costs less. But,
Yep, personally, our local community is going to reduce our consumption of meat over the course of this calendar year and see if we can at least pledge to do 2 meatless days a week. So that's what we're going to do personally. Corporately, LCWR is looking for ways to use the COVID-19 crisis to really affect some systemic change. So we're going to be urging Congress and the next administration to include in our economic recovery funds things like that will facilitate a transition away from our dependence on fossil fuels and create a more environmentally sustainable society. And we're going to be pushing the president over the course of the next few years, particularly over the course of the next year, to reclaim US leadership on the global stage. It re-engaged in the Paris Climate Accord and be an active player and doer of good. So we're going to try to harness our economic clout as something like 38,000 women religious across the country to really see if we can't use this opportunity to make something different, to make more lemonade, as Paz would say.
Awesome.
Delicious lemonade. Thank you. This point, we're going to switch a little bit. And this is for you to start thinking about what your actions can be. How can you lower your carbon footprint or make the connections that we've been talking about? We've got a whole list for you. It is going to be available to you. We're going to send you all these links. But if you go to that link, you will receive a full list that's here in this section of ideas. Do not feel constrained to these ideas. You can come up with your own. There's everything from the usual, they're mostly individual actions, community actions. We do have there some more corporate type of actions. We give you permission, if you wish, to be as creative as possible in your pledges. Once you've pledged, and you can do that 2 ways. You can write a message to me in the question box. I will then add it to the Catholic pledges. Or the best way is to use the link here for climate pledges, where we're collating what the Catholic community is pledging to do in 2020. And we want to be able to use that as we go through social media for Laudato Si week and for Season of Creation, where we can really celebrate what you individually, as a parish, as a family, as a school, as a religious community are doing. And you will have that chance in this pledge. At this point, because we've got a short time, the idea is for you to think of your pledge, of what you're pledging to do, and think of it as we as a community here pray as you think of your pledge. We were going to do it individually, but I want to be able to finish by 2. So think of your pledge and think of my 2020 climate action pledge is. Think of it. This is what you would be putting in your pledge, either on your question box or in that link. And all of us together, the 6 of us who are online and all of you who are participating, will join in this short prayer. Creator God, grant us the wisdom to better care for the earth. Help us to act now for the good of future generations and all your creatures. Help us to become instruments of a new creation, founded on the covenant of your love. And I do give a thank you to Brenna for her allowing us to use her beautiful resources. And remember, you will have these links to submit your pledges. And in your programs, if you were doing it at home or at your communities, you would be doing that sort of prayer after each person says their pledge. And we're going to start closing out with a closing prayer.
O God, your creative love brought forth our world, once a garden where humans could taste and see beauty and goodness. But our eyes do not always see the sacredness of creation. We do not always remember that it is gift, given so that all humans may live and flourish. Inattention can change the world. Even mighty glaciers weep now. Lifestyles create pollution that blot out the sun. The very skies above us are threatened. Seas rise and whole peoples lose their homes. Oh God, we ask you to call us to renewal and to stewardship. Call us to solidarity with the earth and all its creatures. Give us new vision to see the fragile beauty that remains with us. Give us new spiritual energy to become active in loving the world through our daily lives. Give us new voices to speak out for environmental solidarity. Bless us with a love of your creation so that we may glimpse your Eden once again.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Major apologies for the technological issue, but you will receive the recording and the slide deck and all of the links. They're all here on this slide deck. I am not PDFing it. You will be able to change it for your own community's use. You can use all of the links. I want to thank all of my 5 panelists for trying this new novel way of being community now that we can't be in our own little groups. I hope that this program is useful to all of you. I'm here to answer any question about the program. You can either go to info@catholicclimatecovenant.org, or you can send an email to paz@catholicclimatecovenant.org. If you're really looking for more information, you can always go to the website and look there for the link for the Earth Day program, which you would be able to download and have all of this in your hands immediately. Or you can also go to that YouTube link on the top of the Earth Day program, and it'll take you to the Catholic Climate Covenant YouTube site, and there you can see the video immediately. Thank you all very much. Hopefully we'll see you in May with a new webinar. Let me know if you have questions. I will answer all of the questions that are here in this question box in the next hour, I promise. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are they gone?
Not yet. Hold on. They'll still hear us. Hold on. Once I end, you're not going to hear me anymore.
Oh, well, then let us thank you, please.
Okay. Thank you all.
very much for the
Bye-bye.
opportunity. Great.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Paz.
teacher.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.